Hi, and welcome to A Sense of Wellness podcast, inspiring and empowering a healthier you. I'm your host, Susan Greeley, and I'll be diving deeper into the 4 pillars of wellness: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress management. My guest today, who is a retired Navy SEAL commander, is someone I might describe as the definition of resilience. In our discussion today, we will be focusing on how and why meditation can help to undo stress and anxiety and even trauma, and how meditation can truly help to heal and transform our minds. So today I'm speaking with Jon Macaskill, who, as I mentioned, is a retired Navy SEAL commander. Jon has switched gears since his Navy retirement and become a mindfulness and meditation teacher. He is a podcast host and producer himself. He is a keynote speaker and a grit and resilience coach. His goal in life is to help others live their most fulfilling lives. Jon is also the father of 3 young children, and he and his wife, who is a Navy veteran as well, live on a small farm in Colorado Springs. So Jon, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Susan. I'm really happy to be here and excited to see how this conversation unfolds.
I want to say exactly the same thing. I'm very excited to hear about your personal journey and our conversation, and really hope to inspire listeners to practice daily meditation. So to start, Jon, can you please give us as much or as little detail about your time as a Navy SEAL, and then how did you go from being a SEAL to teaching mindfulness and meditation?
That might take up the whole show, but I'll try to keep it somewhat brief. So, yeah, I served in the Navy for 24 years. 17 of that was attached to the SEALs or special operations in some capacity. And in my first deployment, we had a pretty rough run of it and lost a good number of guys. And there was a lot of questioning on my part about why I survived and why they didn't. And so I battled with survivor guilt, and I didn't even realize it was survivor guilt for years. It manifested as anger, it manifested as sadness, manifested as depression, anxiety, and stress. And it caused a lot of strife between me and my then wife. I've since divorced and remarried. It caused strife between me and my coworkers. It just caused inner strife as well. And I went to go see some counselors and got put on various forms of medication, anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants. And I think those helped to a point, and I think there's a time and place for them. But I don't think it is what I needed. It ended up numbing the pain, but it also took away any enjoyment that I had in life and actually caused me to have some fairly dark thoughts about suicide. And I saw another counselor, and he actually took me off of a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, psychiatrist took me off of the medicine, or recommended that I come off of it, and recommended that I try meditation and mindfulness. And I laughed at him initially and said, you know what, doc, this is, I've got some real issues going on. This snake oil stuff that you're trying to sell me, I don't buy into it. And he said, well, what if I had something that would improve your performance, improve your focus, improve your productivity, improve your performance, both mentally and physically? And I thought, well, yeah, whatever that is, I'll take that. And he said, well, it's meditation. It's the same thing. And so I went home and I jumped into, as a type A personality, I thought I was just going to jump right into an hour-long meditation. And I instantly, within about 30 seconds, my mind was wandering off, and it was basically a complete waste of time in my eyes. I thought, okay, well, I'm just one of those people who can't meditate. So I went back to the doc and I said, hey, I just can't meditate. And I told him what had happened. And he said, well, that's like lining up at the start of a marathon and never having run a mile in your life. Or it's like going to the gym and getting under 300 pounds on the bench press without ever having done any weight before. And so I said, okay, I understand those analogies. I'm kind of a meathead. So I went back and I started with, 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute meditations. And I did a few of those every day for several weeks. And I started to see changes in how I was handling stress and how I was handling anxiety and how I felt just in general. And then I did start to see those performance enhancements. I started to communicate better with my wife, my wife now. And I started to enjoy my time with my kid. At the time, I just had my daughter, my 4-year-old. I started to communicate better at work, and I was more focused and more productive. And I got into that state of flow that we all hear about so often, more easily and more readily, more frequently. So I just started to enjoy life, and I came off of the medications that I had been on. And so I started to think, okay, yeah, I'm feeling better. And then I had some people come up to me and actually ask me what I was on and what I was doing. And so I told them a little bit sheepishly at first, because I thought I was going to get laughed out of the room. I told them, hey, I'm actually meditating. And what I expected guys' eyes to kind of glaze over, or for them to quickly walk away and never talk to me again. But almost to a person, I've been asked, oh, well, how's that been? Or why did you get into that? And then I've seen that it did, in fact, change my life for the better, and quite literally save my life. So now I'm sharing it with as many people as will listen. So that's what I do now. I teach meditation, both online and in person. And I'm just loving sharing these practices with others and seeing it change and save their lives.
Wow. I could just listen to you talk about that transformation for hours, Jon. It really is life altering. I mean, I actually started to tear up as you're talking. And just that, so many, the aspect of the medication, think of how many millions of people, it's the most prescribed drugs in the US, I believe, are antidepressants, those and statins. But in any case, coming off of all of the medication, and then when people say, what are you on? That must be the best feeling in the world.
It's great. It is great. Yeah. I always laugh at it.
Yeah. Yes, it is. It's hilarious. And it's it sounds like such a simple thing. I know it's really not. And then how you got there. So one of the first questions I want to ask, and just to make the distinction, is, can you explain the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Yeah, sure can. I love that question. And I appreciate that question, because a lot of the time those get used synonymously, and they're not exactly the same. They're complementary or supplementary. So if you can imagine those little circle diagrams that we used to look at when we were young, the Venn diagrams, when you have mindfulness in one circle and meditation in another. Meditation is a formal practice. Meditation is where you sit down, lay down, stand, walk, but whatever it is, you're formally taking a chunk of time out of your day to do nothing else but meditate. And during that meditation, you can be focused on a mantra. You can be focused on a physical sensation in your body. You can be focused on a body scan. You can be focused on your breath. You're focused on something as an anchor, something to hold you there, or when your mind wanders off, something that will bring you back to that moment in that present state. Mindfulness, on the other hand, in that other circle, in that Venn diagram, that's a way of living. It is being present in the here and now, being focused on what is happening right here, right now, not focused on what you did yesterday or what even happened 5 minutes ago, but right now, and not thinking about what's about to happen in the future. Again, right now. And that's the physical sensations that you're experiencing and the emotions. So what it is you're touching, what it is you're smelling, tasting, seeing, hearing, all that. But then also, are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling happy? And what that present moment actually does for you emotionally. So really the simple term of mindfulness is being intentionally aware of the present moment without any judgment. And then the overlap, again, coming back to that Venn diagram between the two circles, that's the mindfulness meditation. That's where you do a formal practice focusing on the here and now. So you may be focusing on your breath and nothing else, tuning out all the other noise of life, or at least attempting to calm it down. So that's the difference. Meditation is a practice. Mindfulness is a way of being. That's how I see it anyway.
Oh, I like that. Right. And I use that a lot in my coaching as well. In the moment when you're very stressed out, or, catch yourself not breathing, or can feel your heart racing, that's where the mindfulness comes in, and you can change it in that moment. Correct.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the meditation, I mentioned that they're complementary or supplementary. The meditation, when you take that formal practice, you'll find throughout your day, you end up being more mindful because you're actually physiologically rewiring your brain to pay attention to the here and now more regularly. So that's where they complement one another. But absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so why does meditation work for you, and does it or will it work for everyone?
Meditation works for me, and I believe that it does work for everyone if they're willing to put in the work. And it's called a practice for a reason, because it is a practice. You never really perfect it. It takes work. It's a simple practice, but it's not easy. It takes work. So meditation works because as you sit down and you focus on that anchor, again, whether it's your breath, whether it's a mantra, whether it's a body scan of some sort, whatever it may be, as you focus on that, you are literally physiologically rewiring your brain to be focused on that anchor. And as your mind wanders away and you notice that it has wandered away, gently bring yourself back without any judgment. That's where a lot of people make a mistake in meditation is they sit down for 30 seconds, their mind wanders off, and then they beat themselves up. And they say, well, I can't meditate. And now they've developed this kind of negative self-talk about meditation and convince themselves that they can't meditate. If you gently bring yourself back from that wandering thought back to that anchor, that's where the magic actually happens. As you do that over and over and over, you learn to refocus. And that's where the rewiring actually happens. So it's actually a good thing when you notice that your mind just wandered off. But that's how it works. And that's why it works for me. And I believe that it can work for everyone if they put in the time. And what I hear quite often is, I don't have time to meditate. Well, a lot of the time when you take 5, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, 5, 10, 15 minutes after lunch, whenever the case may be, you actually end up getting that time back because now you're more focused throughout your day. You are more productive. Again, as I mentioned before, you more readily and more frequently get into that state of flow. And because you're able to get into that state of flow, you find creativity, you find communication, and you find just being able to get through your workday. You're able to do it a lot quicker. So you actually end up gaining time by putting in 15 minutes. It's an investment. You put in 15 minutes in the morning, you're going to get back 15 minutes at least later in the day, probably more than that. But that's why I think meditation works for me physiologically from the rewiring of the brain. And I believe that it can work for everyone if they put in the time.
It's kind of one of those very compelling claims. Do this and reap this reward.
Exactly.
But this is real. This is not just some claim. And it does have these profound effects on the human brain, on your physical being, your overall performance. And so one of my questions too is, how do you go from zero to building that daily practice and creating the structure? Do you have any, well, I know you teach this, so what would you suggest for people who are in that place with that big hurdle, that negative self-talk saying, tried it, not for me, I can't do it. This really, it's hilarious. It really is hilarious. Pretty much everybody who says that or thinks that, you're just like the person next to you, because I think everybody goes through that when trying to meditate. I did. I do have a daily practice now. It took a while.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So what's your advice for that?
My advice is start small. Don't do like I did and jump into that hour-long meditation day one. Start small, but do it frequently. When we're talking about training for a marathon, they talk about, 2 5-mile runs in a day is just as good, if not better, than a 10-mile run for your body. Well, the same thing with meditation is maybe 2 5-minute meditations is better than a 10-minute meditation, or as good as a 10-minute meditation. So start small, but do it frequently. And then you get into that habit and you literally, again, physiologically are rewiring your brain, doing some neural pruning, neural rewiring. As that happens, the practice gets easier. So the saying is, as you practice, the less you have to practice. Well, that's because that rewiring happens in your brain. So what I recommend is start with an app. I downloaded Insight Timer on my phone. That was my first meditation app. Found some 5-minute meditations and I did those several times throughout the day. And that equaled what I would get out of a 10, 15, 20-minute meditation, but it was easier for me to do mentally. And then over time, that cumulative effect adds up. And over 4, 5, 6 weeks, it becomes easier to sit down for a 15-minute meditation. And then when you do the 15, 20-minute meditations for a few weeks, that's when you really start to see, you get that immediate effect right after the meditation, sure. But after the 6, 7, 8 weeks of practicing regularly, you don't only get that immediate effect so that, I feel better. You get that, I feel better throughout my day. So, sometimes when I first started, I would meditate, and then I would get in my car and I would get cut off in traffic, and I would instantly be stressed out again. And now I find that as I have practiced regularly, I get in my car, I get cut off by somebody, and I don't instantly think, hey, that guy or gal is a jerk. I think, well, that person is a human being. They've got something going on, and there's compassion there. And that allows me to stay out of the red. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still get agitated, I still get stressed out, but I know what's causing it. And I can come out of that situation a lot more quickly and process stress, process anxiety, process depression a lot more in a much healthier way. And I am also aware that the stress is an instance. It's not me. I am not a stress ball. It means I am being stressed at that moment. It means the anxiety is an instance. I am in an anxiety-inducing instance. The depression, something is causing me to be sad at that moment. And that's okay. I can be depressed in that moment. That doesn't mean that Jon Macaskill is a depressed person. And I can come out of that. And that's important to distinguish between the instance of anxiety, stress, and depression rather than I am anxious, I am depressed, I am stressed.
Right. That labeling of ourselves, which serves no good purpose, honestly.
Right.
I hope that alone helps every listener. And because that's such a good starting point right there, is to stop labeling ourselves and stop judging ourselves.
Right.
And
it's huge.
It is huge, isn't it? And it takes time. That also takes practice.
Definitely.
As far as you mentioned having that anchor, do you have, well, I say to people, everybody's different, but do you find that it's important to start with mantra-based or breath work or bodies? Does it matter?
It's some people, the mantra-based, so the transcendental meditation, TM, some people like that better. I personally, the mindfulness meditation worked for me. So mindfulness meditation, being focused on my breath, being focused on a sensation, a body scan, that worked really well for me. And that's still the traditional practice that I do. And then, there's other forms. There's the loving kindness meditations, where you kind of develop compassion for others around you. You develop compassion for yourself. Those are also great. But I recommend starting very simple. Don't even call it meditation. If you're convinced that you can't meditate, just focus on some breath work, quote unquote. And if you can focus on that breath work and see how your body changes physiologically, how your stress level goes down, your heart rate decreases, respiratory rate decreases, you won't notice, but your blood pressure improves as you do this breath work. That can really change how you feel about meditation. Once you successfully do some breath work, then maybe you can delve into some of the deeper types of meditations with that transcendental, with the mantra, with the body scan, some of the loving kindness meditations. But I recommend starting with breath work.
Nice. That's great advice for a starting point. And then I think we have to leave it up to individuals to see how that translates into their own daily actions, behaviors, reactions, or non-reaction to that driver in front of them. I live on the very congested East Coast, and trust me, that comes into play. And even, from my own experience, I will say that's a key area that both mindfulness and meditation have helped me personally, is just simply not reacting. And because we all do get agitated and irritated, it doesn't make our life stresses and stressors go away. And it's been an unusually, I'll call it insanely over the top stressful time for so many people during the pandemic, and even now coming out of it. right? So I want to ask you too, how do you push through it? Do you get derailed, Jon? And because most of us do. And how do you get over that and find like self-motivation or right, like muster up that resilience?
Yeah. I mean, we're all human beings, and there's definitely times I come off the rails. Can I
interject?
Sure.
You have very young children too. So for listeners, right?
I do. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-month-old, and they help me to come off the rails sometimes. I adore them, but there's some frustrations that come with being a parent. That are just inherent to the job. But again, that being inherent to the job is also inherent to being a human being, how you react to things. But the way that I feel I get back onto the rails, get things under control, is some of that just basic breath work. There's an organization that I work for called My Steady Mind, and we have an acronym, BAMO, BAMO, and it's breathe and move on. And I'll find that I will just take one little breath and notice that breath. And then I'll move on and say, okay, you know what? This spilled milk or a diaper that has been pulled out of the trash and is now on the kitchen floor, that is not that big a deal. Just move on. There's no reason to come off the rails for that. But the key is also to realize that coming off the rails is a natural thing, and don't beat yourself up. We talked about not beating yourself up inside of a meditation earlier. Well, don't beat yourself up for having natural human reactions, but you can also gain control of those reactions and turn them into responses that are more rational by meditating and by becoming more mindful of your surroundings and just being aware of your inner response. And then not beating yourself up for having that natural reaction in the moment, but then breathe and move on, BAMO, and gain that control back.
It's true. I love that. And I think that that's very empowering for people too. Once you experience that, you're like, hey, I got through that differently. And,
right.
Feels good, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And those around you also notice that you're doing things differently, right? So your spouse, your significant other, your children, your friends, family, whatever the case may be, they notice that you may have come off the rails, but you get back on much quicker. And then they can emulate that. I mean, my children, they're learning emotions. They're learning, how a face, as you make a different face, you're expressing a different emotion. We actually have rather than a time out corner, we have a time in corner. And whenever our children get upset, we don't put them in time out. We put them in time in. We go down to a really nice little area. It's got cushions. It's actually got a little teepee set up, and it's got on the wall. It has different feelings and emotions and what those faces are that go along with those feelings and emotions. And we ask them, hey, what are you feeling right now? Mostly my 4-year-old daughter, because she can talk through this a lot better than my 2-year-old and my 1-month-old, right? But my 4-year-old, she'll point at, frustrated. And okay, well, why are you frustrated? Well, because dad was trying to help me more than he should have. And she will talk through that. And it's pretty amazing to see that and that's mindfulness, right? That's mindfulness in its purest state. The child being aware of their emotions and why they are expressing and feeling those emotions. But the reason I even go down that rabbit hole is to show that those around us can also emulate our attempts to stay on the tracks, stay on the rails.
Oh, that's huge. Communication is difficult, right? It starts young. So I love that story, Jon. I needed to employ that maybe a few years ago. That's okay. No, in all honesty, with my youngest, so back to share my own personal story as a mom to 4. It's only with my youngest that literally every single night I use an app that helps him get to sleep.
Nice.
Meditation. Yeah. So we put on the meditation every single night, and I wish I had known about that sooner. And even with the app, people don't know how to start. I did the same thing. You mentioned that. Those are very, very helpful tools. And who doesn't
Absolutely
have on them, right?
Yeah.
In speaking with one of my podcast guests recently, we were talking about all of these digital devices, and it's not all negative, not at all. In fact, there's a lot of good that comes out of it if you can use it for self-care. And I think that that's the key thing for people to know is there are a lot of self-care tools at our disposal now because of technology, right? And you and I wouldn't be doing this podcast without technology. So I'm grateful.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And speaking of which, so let me ask you a little bit about your own self-care practices. Do you have a daily structured self-care or,
I have an ideal, what happens in the ideal situation. Ideally, I get up early before my children get up so that I have the time to spend. I'm personally a spiritual man, so I spend some time in my scriptures and doing that. And then I spend 15 to 30 minutes meditating. And I use an app. I use Insight Timer, or I use Calm or Headspace. I normally use an app of some sort. And then I do that again after lunch. I do try to do 15 minutes after lunch. I don't meditate per se to go to sleep, but I listen to some calming music to go to sleep, or I'll listen to some of the stories. The Calm app has stories that are built into it, and I'll listen to some of those to put me to bed, just to settle my mind. But if I find that if I meditate formally, for some reason, I actually get energy from meditation. Some people get really calm and are able to fall asleep after meditating. I personally get energy. That's why I like doing it in the morning. It settles my mind, but it gives me energy, settles my mind so that I'm focused throughout the morning. And then I do it again after lunch so that I'm focused and I have that energy for the after lunch period. And then I listen to the calming music or a story to go to sleep. That's my ideal practice. Sometimes it's less than ideal. Sometimes my kids get up earlier than I plan on them getting up, and they kind of interrupt my planned morning routine. And you just have to roll with it. If you can get a 2-minute breathing exercise, that breath work that I mentioned before, then that's better than nothing. So you understand, just like the gym, there's the ideal plan, and sometimes you have to veer from that ideal plan, but don't do a all or nothing plan. So, hey, if I don't get 15 minutes, then I'm not going to get anything. It's just like going to the gym. If you don't get an hour-long workout, that doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get 10 minutes in. Try to get something in. And that's where I found was the big game changer, is that just having repetition and some type of routine that you can stick to that develops the habit. And that's where that neurological rewiring happens. And that's the important part.
I think that is the most important takeaway. And honestly, Jon, with each of the pillars that I focus on and any sort of positive behavior change, it's the small steps. It's the small daily steps make that difference, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Feel like we've failed at. So it's true. That's extremely important to reiterate that, and start small.
Right.
Start small and just focus on the daily things happen on a daily basis. The best laid plans, right? As we know, often.
That's right. When I speak on resilience, I often quote Mike Tyson in that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. That's just like every day. Every day we're going to get that proverbial punch in the face. Granted, it may not be a literal punch in the face, but life is going to come at you, and your kids are going to get up earlier than what you had planned, or you're going to have a new deadline at work that you hadn't anticipated, or something is going to happen to throw your perfectly laid plan off. But if you're able to veer from that plan, that's better than not having any plan at all. So have something to veer from.
It's that structure. I think most human beings in general do better with some sort of structure, even if some people fight against it, say, I don't like structure. We all do better with some. And that's where, like I said, starting your day with some sort of mindfulness practice and then transforming that into meditation daily, I highly recommend. Absolutely. I could talk all day about this, and I know
it's a fun topic.
It is a very fun topic, and I think people listen now more than they ever have. And look at your life, where you were for, what'd you say, 24 years?
Yeah, 24 years.
The whole other lifetime. Would you ever have seen or thought of yourself doing this?
No. As a matter of fact, if somebody had told me that, I would have laughed at them for sure.
And I think you're so much better at it because of the life, what you went through. And it's really true. So that said, I just want to quickly ask too, since you run your own podcast, what is it about? What is it?
It's about mindfulness. I teamed up with, the joke is what happens when a retired Navy SEAL and a hippie get together to talk about mindfulness. And that's what it is. It's me and then my friend who is a self-proclaimed hippie living in New York City. The show is called Men Talking Mindfulness, and the idea is to break down the stigma that surround these practices for men. The show is not for men only, because we bring in women, men, different genders, different colors, different ethnicities. We bring in everything. But we have a lot of fun on the show. And Men Talking Mindfulness. We just wrapped up our second season. Third season starts July 9th, and we go live via video on several different platforms. And then that's transferred rather to audio the following week. Men Talking Mindfulness.
I like it. Man Talking Mindfulness. That's what you said. Okay, but that's not under, I want to mention, I really love your social media handle as Mindful Frogman, right?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah, just the frogman. That's the one of the terms for the Navy SEALs, and then the mindful side of it.
So that's how you find Jon. I'll have you give us more specifically, though. I really love this conversation, and I don't want it to end. So I hope you come back and talk to me more.
I will, definitely.
Yeah. So, and on that note, I'm going to ask one final question, Jon, that I ask of all of my guests. And that is, what is one thing you're grateful for today? At this moment.
The one thing that I'm grateful for, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm grateful for my wife. And I know that's probably sounds trite, but my wife is my absolute hero in my life and keeps me on the straight and narrow, and is also my rock in support and allows me to do this for a living. It's kind of a scary step that we've taken from the military with a constant steady paycheck. And I mean, I still get a retirement, which is nice, but I told her that I'm going to be a mindfulness and meditation teacher, and she supported that. So,
probably. That's
that's right. Yep.
I love that, Jon. Love that. Well, this is wonderful. And one thing that I'm going to walk away, I'm grateful to have you here today. It's fabulous. And that BAMO, breathe and move on.
That's right.
Take that through today and every day.
Yeah, we've actually got some shirts made with that printed on the back. BAMO, breathe and move on. So.
I hadn't heard that before, and I'm in this world. So
yeah,
thank you. That's great. And finally, how can listeners find you? Where and how? Yeah,
well, like you mentioned, my handle on most social media is Mindful Frogman, all one word, Mindful Frogman. And then on LinkedIn is where I'm most prolific, I believe. And that's just my name, Jon, Jon Macaskill, Macaskill. And I believe I'm the only Jon Macaskill, former Navy SEAL, now turned mindfulness teacher on LinkedIn. I know there is another Navy SEAL that's doing this, and that's great. I love it. But yeah, I'm the only one with Jon Macaskill.
Yeah, it's a safe bet to say. Well, fabulous. Yeah. Thank you again very much. I think you're a true inspiration, and we'll keep together,
Absolutely. Yeah, please. And thank you for the opportunity to share my story and to continue sharing the value of these practices and how important they are, but also how to get into them if you've ever had any anxiety or reticence about getting started. It's easier than it sounds. So jump into it.
It is easier than it sounds. We'll leave listeners with that. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for taking the time to join me and listen to this episode. Listeners can find more information and also subscribe to the Sense of Wellness podcast at www.ccphp.net/SENS/podcast. That's www.ccphp.net/SENS/podcast. This show is brought to you by Castle Connolly Private Health Partners. We are a concierge medicine organization that partners with exceptional physicians to deliver an unrivaled healthcare experience while also empowering our members to achieve their optimal well-being. Be sure to listen in next time to the Sense of Wellness podcast, and remember, simple daily habits matter most.